connecting several major towns across the counties of Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, was once a railway running from Hertford in the east to Leighton Buzzard in the west. And though it closed several decades ago, its legacy is still marked on the landscape, for better and for worse. Though track has been lifted and buildings raised, so much of this line has found new life, new beginnings, and new purpose. Join me then in discovering what has become of this line, what has become of all its stations, and maybe you can determine if this line should have closed, as we ask whether or not this railway is now a vital missing link. Located 20 miles north of central London is Hertford, the county town of Hertfordshire and the start of our journey. Heading west, we reach Welwyn Garden City on the East Coast Main Line. Leaving Hertfordshire, we continue cross-country to the town of Luton on the Midland Main Line and Dunstable, before concluding our exploration in Leighton Buzzard on the West Coast Main Line. At just over 30 miles in length, we have not a moment to lose, so let's proceed. Our journey begins here with a view of Hertford Cowbridge Railway Station. It could be a village shop or the like, but no, it was from here that trains began their journey towards Hatfield. Opened in 1858, it was renamed Hertford North in 1923, before its closure a year later, when the Hertford Loop Line opened and the new station, which we will come to, took its name. The site today, enclosed by various fortifications, does not betray the presence of the old characterful building at all. But if we look to the west, we find where the railway once crossed over the River Bean. Then, under Port Hill, and under another bridge here on Balfour Street, where the track bed remains in place. As to the abutments of an overbridge on Port Vale. Perhaps more secluded, the presence of the raised embankment running parallel to Bean Road, now an unofficial footpath of sorts. Crossing the River Bean for the final time, the railway then took a southerly curve, continuing on an embankment through what is now a car park. Only a portion of the railway embankment remains here, and is marked by the presence of this mast. But on the other side of this, we see the present iteration of Hertford North Station. Out of shot beneath us on North Road, one of the railway bridge's abutments is still to be found. Here the platforms of Hertford North, where the line from Cowbridge once connected from the right. The station has 2 through platforms for services to Stevenage and Moorgate, and 1 bay platform for terminating services from London. To the south of the station, the line for Hatfield and Welwyn branched off approximately where the siding leads at the centre of the picture. And rather than continue over the delightful viaduct that carries trains over the plateau of the Lee Valley, our train descended, crossing the River Mimram here, then passing beneath the viaduct at this point. And over this bridge. At which point, the railway undertakes a transformation into the Chaul Greenway, a foot and cycle path which more or less follows the railway's course into Welwyn and, as we will see, has done much to celebrate the line's heritage. So, let us see what the next 6 miles has to offer. I hope you're enjoying this film so far. Should this railway have closed? Do you think it should reopen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Here we find relics by the trackside. And whilst the signal arm here may not be original, the post certainly is. So we journey for another half a mile, and, if we listen carefully, we might just hear what once was. A little over 1.5 miles since we departed Hertford Cowbridge, we reached the first stop on our line, Hertingfordbury. Opened in 1858, the station closed under a century later in 1951. Today, the building is a private residence. But you may be interested to know that, according to the excellent Disused Stations website, the station featured in the 1936 British musical comedy When Nights Were Bold. Upon departure, trains would immediately cross St Mary's Lane and journey for a further 1.5 miles. Whereupon, hidden in the hedgerow, we find what remains of some buffer stops and a clue that we are reaching a significant station on the line. So it is that we reach the station that gives its name to this cycleway, Chaul Green. And what a delightful looking place it was, perhaps the sort of country station one sees in their mind's eye. Hereabouts were 2 platforms, with canopied waiting rooms and a 30-lever signal box controlling access to the goods yard, which remained open until 1962, 11 years after the station's closure to passengers. From a similar position several decades hence. Though much is taken, much abides. Thanks to those who cleared this site, what remains of this station is now evident to all. Along the perimeter, characterful metal fencing can still be found. And not to be outshone by Hertingfordbury, Chaul Green featured in the 1951 film The Lady with a Lamp, which tells the story of Florence Nightingale. Here, some stills from the film. Bidding farewell to Chaul Green, we journey westward for another 1.5 miles, where we find one of 2 halts that served this railway. Here was once Hatfield Hyde Halt. Along with Atmore Hall Halt, which we will see later, Hatfield Hyde Halt was opened by the railway company in an effort to boost passenger numbers, a venture that ultimately failed. Opening in approximately 1905, it closed 2 years later. No trace of the station is to be found here, but the crossing keeper's house continues to stand guard. Our route now becomes much more urban in character as we travel 1/2 mile to the next station. Here was once Atmore Hall Halt. Built, like its predecessor on the line, to stoke revenue for the railway, it was a venture that was ultimately unsuccessful. The scene today is quite different, but we stand in approximately the same place. Here was the onward course of the railway. Which, as we see from the air, is now largely redeveloped in the intervening years since closure. See here on Tuin Road, the bricks which mark the site of the railway's crossing. And on Bessemer Road, a bridge which trains have not crossed for many a year. Thereafter, the railway took a turn south through what is now a residential development, and thus joined the East Coast Main Line. In fact, hereabouts was a workman's platform known as Welwyn Junction. Let's be clear, at the time of its construction, Welwyn was a small nearby village rather than the large town it is today. There was to be a triangular junction here so trains from Hertford could run north, but this never materialised. So it was that trains from Hertford ran south to Hatfield and terminated. Upon the opening of the line to Luton and Dunstable, trains would depart Hatfield and travel north. Welwyn Garden City Station opened in 1926. Here it is back in the day. Inevitably, alterations, extensions and demolitions have occurred over the years. The original ticket hall was a victim of the latter in 1990 and is now incorporated into the Howard Centre, a shopping complex. Now the trains sneak round the back. The Hertford and Welwyn Junction Railway closed to passengers in 1957 and goods in 1962. So to the next phase of our journey and the Dunstable branch. Having departed Hatfield, trains travelled north and, up to 1926, called at Welwyn Garden City Halt. Originally built to serve the men and materials required to construct this new town, it eventually opened to the general public. When today's Welwyn Garden City Station opened in 1926, a few hundred yards to the south, this halt was surplus to requirements and swiftly demolished. It was sited about here, to the left of the picture. The branch peeled westwards, away from the main line, through what is now a car park. Just beyond, the track bed is still accessible, and here it passed beneath Digswell Road. From the top, it is certainly one of the route's more decorative structures. Proceeding west, the railway curved north, before continuing west once more. It is now the Ayot Greenway foot and cycle path. Outside of Welwyn now, and urban gives way to rural. 2 miles from Welwyn Garden City Station was Ayot. With a goods yard, signal box, and a number of other features, this was not an insubstantial station, and, as can be seen, it was quite attractive. Perhaps more famous for its death rather than its life, the station, of timber construction, caught fire and burnt down in July 1948, never to be rebuilt and never to be reopened, though the sidings continued to serve goods traffic until 1962. Looking west towards Wheathampstead, we see the situation then and now. Continuing our journey, the railway crossed Ayot St Peter Road, on the other side of which railway fence posts still flank the line. And so the line meandered for a little under 3 miles, whereupon it arrived in the village of Wheathampstead. With a single line and a single platform to its name, the station here continued the trend of being delightfully appointed, with goods facilities situated to the west across the road. After years of neglect, the local community took it upon themselves to reverse the fortunes of this site. And whilst the service to Wheathampstead may not have been restored, so much has, and the result is quite remarkable. In its wilderness years, the station appeared on the cover of the Magic Lanterns' 1969 album, Shame, Shame. And who have we here? Ah yes, the figure of George Bernard Shaw, who frequented the station in order to travel into the capital. He now presides over the station, and, on the track in front of him, this Great Western Railway 5-plank open wagon, which was placed here in 2013. Maybe we have lingered at this remarkable station too long, and our journey ahead beckons. Having crossed the road via a long since demolished bridge, we can see the railway embankment and hereabouts the site of the station's goods shed and yard. And here, a mile to the west, the crossing keeper's house on Leasey Bridge Lane. The sounds of steam have not been heard along here for so many years, as the memory of the railway fades. So we arrive at our next station, Harpenden East. This was the first of 2 stations to serve the town, when the Midland Railway opened a competing station in 1868. We face east, back towards Wheathampstead, in this view as a service pulls in past the signal box towards the right of the picture. And here, facing west, the goods shed and a glimpse of the small but busy yard beyond. Today, there is nothing. Housing now stands where track once lay, and it is as if the station never existed. Back into the countryside now, albeit briefly. But what's this now? Here the Midland Main Line crossed our railway and continues to run an almost parallel course for the next few miles. Next stop, Luton Hoo. Built close to the eponymous stately home, the station was originally named New Mill End, the principal village it served, and this was in fact the station's name until 1891. As with other stations on the line, there was a signal box and, in this case, a small goods yard across the road. Looking in the same direction today, we can see part of the station platform, though most of this is now concealed by fencing. Here's a view of the station building, now a private dwelling. And here it is, brimming with character when trains once called. Less salubrious, an extant plate layer's hut to the station's west, now incorporated into the adjacent waste treatment works. The weather's on the turn now, as the country gives way to town. And among the encroaching clouds overhead, we must be entering Luton, from whose airport planes depart. Upon entering Luton, the railway ran along what is now Gypsy Lane. And here, through this slight cutting, now degraded by litter. Before crossing a bridge here on Kimpton Road, where one of the abutments is still to be seen. Road has conquered rail here, and for the next several miles hence, the trackbed is now occupied by the Luton and Dunstable guided busway. More on this later, but here trains pass beneath Crawley Green Road. And over the now demolished bridge on Hitchin Road. So it was that some 15 miles since departing Hatfield, and 12 miles from Welwyn Garden City, trains arrived at the next station, Luton Bute Street. Luton's first station, opened in 1858, provided the town with a direct link to London. But its dominance would last but a decade, for in 1868 the Midland Railway opened its competing station on the Midland Main Line to London St Pancras. The station comprised 3 platforms, and there were extensive sidings and facilities for goods. From here, the railways helped the hat-making industry, for which the town was famous, continue to flourish as they were delivered by rail across the country. All gone now, all gone. Bute Street Station lived alongside its younger cousin until 1965, when it closed to passengers and was swiftly demolished. Here's Luton's surviving station, just next door. So to the Busway, which opened in 2013 and occupies the railway's course all the way into Dunstable. The roads between these two towns suffer greatly from congestion. The Busway is meant to go some way to alleviate it. And so this innocuous-looking bridge marks the presence of our next station, Chaul End Halt. Living only an ephemeral life, it opened in 1915 and was built to serve a munitions factory and its workers. Closed and demolished 4 years after it opened, over a century later, there is nothing to suggest the station was ever here. Indeed, there's not much to suggest a railway was ever here either, as we travel the 2.5 miles into the next station, Dunstable Town. Opened in May 1858 as Dunstable Church Street, it was nearly 70 years before the station's name was changed to Dunstable Town, and early on in that history the station was redeveloped to a higher standard, though it was largely constructed of timber, including its platform, as can be seen here. The goods yard closed in 1964, and the station to passengers a year later. The buildings were swiftly demolished, and the site passed through several hands over the years, languishing in a poor state. But from the same position today, we see that order has been restored, even if trains, track and station have not. Here's the view west, with a DMU idling at the platform. No up and no down, from Formby Four Crosses to Dunstable Town. Beyond the station now, and the concrete beams that now guide buses are true to the railway's course. Where those buses now proceed right was once the railway's route to a cement works, but ahead, through the trees and bushes, was the way deeper into Dunstable. Here trains crossed Watling Street via a now demolished bridge, which delivered trains into the next station, Dunstable North. The bridge across the road was to the left of the picture here, which presents the low profile of Dunstable North Station in glorious colour. Comprising 3 platforms, of which one was a bay platform, there was also a large goods yard behind the main building. This closed in 1967, 2 years after goods traffic. Demolition of the station occurred in 1968, along with track lifting. Now bereft of any station at all, Dunstable has the ignominy of being one of the largest towns in the south-east without any connection to the railway. On the station site, now, council offices. So the final phase of our journey begins, and once more urban gives way to rural in the form of Sewell Cutting. Now a nature reserve, it is surely one of the more striking features of the railway we have seen on our journey thus far. Just beyond, this bridge carries the Chaul Greenway, which follows the railway's course onwards. Onwards and downwards, the camera conceals the extent of the descent. And so delivered trains into our penultimate station, Stanbridgeford. Trains stopped here from 1849. The station was especially popular with visitors from Leighton Buzzard. Alongside the delightful station building was a small goods yard. Today, the station building remains in use as a private residence. To the rear, the Way Office also stands. And continuing the theme of film and television appearances, in October 1968, the station featured in the Avengers episode Noon Doomsday. For some distance yet, the railway's alignment is now occupied by the A505. Then into Leighton Buzzard, though as we can see here, the route has been lost to redevelopment. But here, looking back towards Stanbridgeford, the railway once travelled towards us. Then crossed both the River Ousel and the Grand Union Canal by means of this fine bridge. I wonder if the residents of Mentmore Gardens know that a railway once passed through where their houses now stand. And along here on Cedars Way, adjacent to which we find the old crossing house, out of place with such characterful architecture. And so trains approach the final station where trees now grow, and where a car park now stands. 10 miles from Luton by rail, we arrive at Leighton Buzzard. Located on the West Coast Main Line, we see several shots of the station from over the years, wherein it has been demolished, rebuilt and extended to accommodate the changing nature of rail travel. The platforms to Dunstable opened in 1848 and survived until 1989, when the station was utterly redeveloped. It has been suggested that the car park side of the fence might represent a surviving edge of the platform to Dunstable, Luton and beyond, but this has been challenging to confirm. If the station continued to be a junction to these places, I wonder if there would be sufficient passenger traffic to sustain it. So, is this railway now a vital missing link? For those living and working along this east-west corridor, this line would undoubtedly benefit connections between the major towns and may have gone some way to mitigate the traffic congestion therein. The links to north-south express routes such as the East Coast, West Coast and Midland Main Lines would also see communities once more connected to the national network. A missing link then? Yes, to be sure. But vital? Here we enter the realm of the subjective. No doubt the case can be made either way. Even though the return of rails along this line is unlikely ever to occur, what is certain is that through ingenuity, imagination, preservation, and reconfiguration, the spirit of connecting towns and villages, big and small, undoubtedly endures. I hope you enjoyed this film. Please like, share, leave a comment and subscribe so you can join me once again in rediscovering lost railways.